see. Again, I found it really hard to top last year, so anyway, I'm gonna read you Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It's not a super long story, although Mr. Irving did put in several unnecessary flourishing descriptions of things. I'm gonna read you the abridged version. I did try to read the unabridged version, and as much as I love it, nearly put myself to sleep, so I thought abridged is the way. Anyway, I'm gonna get started. On the eastern shore of the Hudson River lies the small market town called Greensboro. It is also known as Tarrytown in the great state of New York. It is said that this name was given to the town by the housewives that lived nearby because their husbands had a habit of hanging or tarrying at the local village tavern on market days. Not far from this village is a small valley surrounded by hills with a lovely brook. This place is said to be so tranquil that, on occasion, you can only hear the sound of a woodpecker. I remember my first experience squirrel hunting as a youngster. I wandered into a glen around noontime, and it was the type of place where you could go and dream quietly away the remnant of a troubled life. There was no more of a serene place than this. The echoing roar of my gun was the only angry noise that broke the stillness of this place. The inhabitants of such a place, which was known as Sleepy Hollow, are the descendants of the first Dutch settlers, and their boys are called the Sleepy Hollow Boys. It is rumored that this glen is haunted by a high German doctor who practiced sorcery. He is believed to have cast a spell on the little town of Sleepy Hollow. Others say that it is haunted by an old Indian chief who held his powwows there before Captain Henry Hudson discovered the place. It is certain that something has a spell on the people that live there. The whole place is filled with tales that are told all of the time. Sometimes they say that you can hear music and see strange lights. The most powerful haunting in this glen is that of the Headless Horseman. Some say he's the ghost of a Hessian trooper, a British mercenary, whose head was shot off during the Revolutionary War. Anyone who has ever lived there has seen him riding at night, as if on the wings of the wind. He travels through the glen, past the church, down the neighboring roads, and he became known as the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. During a remote period in American history lived a teacher by the name of Ichabod Crane. Crane was a native of Connecticut. He is described as a tall, lanky man with long legs, a small head, huge ears, and a long, pointy nose. He gave the appearance of a homeless person because of his baggy clothes. Ichabod was a school teacher who came to Sleepy Hollow to fill the teaching vacancy. Ichabod's schoolhouse was a one-room building made of logs. The windows were dull and partly patched with the leaves of old school books. The school was situated in a wooded area close to the brook, and children's voices could be heard, as well as the authoritative voice of Crane, who believed in the maximum spare the rod and spoil the child. He administered punishment with discrimination. His rod passed by weak, and the tough-headed students got double portions. However, his punishments were always followed by the assurance that the young student would remember the punishment and thank him in the long run. He made sure to keep on good voice resounded far above the rest of the congregation, and his education and accomplishments made him an important figure among the women. You would see him on Sundays during and after church in the company of the country damsels who admired his conversation. And there were evenings he spent time with the older Dutch wives, listening to all the tales of Sleepy Hollow. He shared stories of witches and witchcraft in Salem, and in addition was very prone to carrying gossip from one house to another. Ichabod Crane was well read, quite knowledgeable in Cotton Mather's History of New England Witchcraft. After school, he would often retire to the brook. He would lie there reading Mather's book until dusk, and then he would make his way to his farmhouse as he traveled through the woods, listening to the sounds of nature. His imagination began to take over, and the idea of ghosts and evil spirits arose. They were the subject of the tales that the Dutch wives told. The only thing he could do was drown those thoughts by singing his way home. Neighbors would hear him sing melodies that floated from the distant hill, and all the while Ichabod walked towards home, questioning every rustling shrub, the sounds of howling from the trees, the glares of distant windows, shadows, shapes, and even the sound of his own footsteps. All these, however, were mere terrors of the night, phantoms of the mind that walk in the darkness. Ichabod held music classes one evening each week, and one of his students was 18-year-old Katrina van Tassel, the daughter of a prominent Dutch family. Ichabod was drawn to the beautiful girl. He visited her home, which was the mansion of her father, Baltus van Tassel, a proud man not caught up in his wealth. He took care of his family on this vast property, and it was situated on the banks of the Hudson River. As he entered the mansion, Ichabod's mouth watered as he pictured himself living such a wealthy life, and he desired Katrina even more, and he knew that she would inherit all that his eyes beheld. Immediately, his imagination flourished with the idea of how he could turn it all into cash and move Katrina and their children to Kentucky, Tennessee, or God only knows where. Ichabod began to plot how to gain the affection of Katrina. There were, of course, difficulties to handle. Katrina had many admirers who were always watching and competing with each other. Abraham was his chief competitor because Katrina encouraged his advances. This suitor was a handsome horseman and the hero of the country. Ichabod described him as Herculean. Abraham was known throughout the town as Brom Bones. The neighbors looked upon him with a mixture of awe, admiration, and goodwill. And when any madcap, prank, or rustic brawl occurred in the vicinity, they always shook their heads and warranted Brom Bones was at the bottom of it. Such a formidable rival would discourage the average man, but not Ichabod Crane. Ichabod's advances toward Katrina were subtle. He used his music position as his cover, which gave him many opportunities to visit the lovely Katrina. As a result, a feud arose between Brom and Ichabod. Ichabod became the object of whimsical persecution by Brom and his gang of rough riders. They stopped up the chimney at the time he was having music class. They broke into the schoolhouse at night and vandalized it. And worst of all, Brom took to ridiculing Ichabod in front of Katrina. Brom even taught his dog to howl whenever Ichabod was teaching music. All of these antics went on for quite some time, and one fine autumn day, while his students were working in the schoolhouse, a man came to the school. He was riding on a half-broken colt, and he brought Ichabod an invitation for Mr. Van Tassel's party. Ichabod was so excited he dismissed the class early without the students putting away their books. was old Brower, who had been a disbeliever in the existence of ghosts. He saw the horseman turn into a skeleton, and the horseman threw old Brower in the brook. Brown Bones told all he'd encountered the horseman who challenged him to a race. Brown contended he would have won if the horseman had not vanished into a flash of fire. Ichabod described the fearful sights he had seen while walking at night, but he had not experienced sightings of the headless horseman. After the stories were shared, the families departed for home. Ichabod stayed for a while to talk to Katrina, and when he left the mansion, it was the witching hour. As he traveled home, he could hear the distant barking of a dog, the croaking of a bullfrog, and the crowing of a rooster. The sounds were so far away that they were like dreams to Ichabod. Visually, there were no signs of life, and in his mind he recalled the ghost stories told by the elders. He was nearing the enormous tulip tree that was used to hang the British spy, Major John Andre, and Ichabod thought he heard a whistle, and then a groan, and then thought he saw something white hanging in the tree. A ghost? No, not a ghost. Finally, he passed the tree unharmed, but 200 yards from the tree was a small brook and a rustic bridge made of logs. This was the exact place that Andre was captured, and the stream was said to be haunted. As Ichabod approached the stream in fear, he tried to get gunpowder to race across, but old Gunpowder ended up coming to a quick stop at the bridge. His stop was so quick that Ichabod almost flew over his head. Just then, Ichabod saw something huge in the shadows. It stood perfectly still as if it was preparing to attack, and Ichabod was so scared that the hair stood up on his head. He mustered up enough courage to speak. Who are you? He got no answer, and he began to sing, which is what he did in fear. And finally, he recognized the figure to be a horseman riding a powerful black horse. Ichabod remembered Brown Bones' story of outriding the horseman, and therefore Ichabod thought surely he could do that. Whenever he sped up, the stranger did the same. If Ichabod slowed down, the stranger did the same. Then light gave him a clearer glimpse of the stranger, and Ichabod was horror-struck when he realized he was headless. He saw the stranger's head hanging from his saddle, and his terror rose to desperation. He rained a shower of kicks and blows upon poor Gunpowder, hoping by a sudden movement to give his companion the slip, but the specter started to full jump with him. Away then they dashed through thick and thin, stones flying and sparks flashing at every bound. Ichabod's flimsy garments fluttered in the air as he stretched his long, lank body away over the horse's head in the eagerness of his flight. When Ichabod reached the road to Sleepy Hollow, Gunpowder turned in the opposite direction, towards a shady hollow leading to the whitewashed church. As Gunpowder sped through the hollow, Ichabod felt the saddle slip from under him. All he could do was hang on to the neck of his horse, and eventually search for Ichabod. He found the saddle on the road leading to the church, and then he came upon Ichabod's hat and a shattered pumpkin. They searched the brook for his body, but no body was ever found. Hans von Ripper was the executor of Ichabod Crane's estate. All of Ichabod's property was contained in one large bundle, consisted of 2 shirts and a half, 2 stocks for the neck, a pair or 2 of stockings, an old pair of corduroy small clothes, a rusty razor, a book of psalm tunes full of dog's ears, and a broken pitch pipe. Dog's ears were the folded down corners of a book that let you know when you left off reading. He also had a copy of Cotton Mather's History of New England Witchcraft and the New England Almanac, and a book of dreams and fortune-telling. Ichabod's last salary was the only money he had, and it must have been on him when he disappeared. The people of the town who gathered at church the following Sunday came to the conclusion that the Headless Horseman had taken Ichabod Crane. No one sought any other reason for his disappearance because he had no family there, and he had no debts. The school was moved to another part of the hollow, and another teacher was hired. Several years later, an old farmer came to town for a visit. He told people that Ichabod Crane was alive. He said that he'd left out of fear of ghosts and because Katrina had rejected him. According to the farmer, Ichabod had moved far away, taught in school, enrolled in school to study law, and had even been elected to public office. Nevertheless, the older Dutch wives believed he'd been taken away by the Hessian soldier. Brom Bones, who married Katrina, was observed to look exceedingly knowing whenever the story of Ichabod was related, and he always burst into a hearty laugh at the mention of the pumpkin, which led some to suspect he knew more about the matter than he chose to tell. I love that story. It always puts me in a Halloween mood. You know, when you can hear the leaves crunching on the forest floor, and you can hear the frogs and the crickets and smell the autumn air, and then you imagine this horse flying behind you and you can see the pumpkin flying towards you. I just love it. I loved it when we read it in school when I was small, and I love it now. Thank you guys so much for joining me for Spooktober. My next focus on my channel is my Patreon. If you're a Patreon of mine, bless you. Thank you so much. You guys have gotten me through so many things, and you have made the advances on this channel possible. The background, the new camera, and thank you. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. I loved Spooktober. I loved publishing all of this content for you. I would love to expand my channel even more in order to do things like that. It was so easy. I am actually almost envious of ASMR content creators that can just make whatever they want. I could publish so much more content if I didn't have to research. And in fact, based on the views of Spooktober, I've considered opening another channel. Not true crime related at all, just ASMR content that is just ASMR content, just random. Let me know if you're still listening, how you feel about that down below. Or if you just want it here on Geekwares. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate each and every one of you guys. I see all these new true crime content creators popping up, and I'm thankful that you guys still choose to watch my channel. I know that when I first started out, you couldn't see me very well, and, you know, I talked a lot about my mom, and just thank you. Thank you for being here, those OG people that stayed, the new people that tell me that I am so underappreciated. That makes me feel so good. I don't believe it necessarily, but thank you for taking